Welcome to Minter Dialogue number 62. This interview is with Sterling Proffer, whom I met at South by Southwest 2013 down in Austin, Texas. Sterling works at one of the most fascinating and disruptive companies called Vice Media. Vice are publishers, aggregators, curators, and social platforms all in one. As director of platform at Vice, Sterling's job is to help them navigate that world and position them across every place that the audience can find them. I believe that the lessons for brands are multiple. A stimulating discussion, to say the least. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Minter Dialogue Internet Show, where we discuss brand marketing with a focus on all things digital. I am Minter Dial, author of TheMyndset.com. That's TheMyndset, where branding gets personal. You'll find the show notes on the blog for the upcoming interview. Let's cut to the quick. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the Minter Dialogue Internet Show. Today we're piped in direct to Manhattan, which I'm told is not the sunniest of Manhattans these days. I have someone I met at South by Southwest, thanks to my good friend from the New York Times, Jennifer Preston. Sterling, tell us who you are and what you do, as my friend Mitch Joel always says.
Who am I and what do I do? I guess the question would be in what context, but maybe in the context of this chat. I'm the director of platform for Vice Media, a global youth media company. Means I oversee partnerships and distribution, basically, how the brand exists in a networked, I guess, media landscape.
All right, so Vice Media, for most of us over here in Europe, we're not going to know much about that. So tell us more about what is Vice Media.
I would hope that would change soon. We're a global youth media company. So while we are headquartered in Brooklyn, New York, we have offices in London, in Paris, in Barcelona, in Milan, 35 offices around the world. And I guess, Vice, it started as a newsprint monthly in Montreal in 1994, moved down to New York in 1999, began expanding, in different categories. So they launched a record label in 2002. They had done events. They started doing book publishing. In 2006, they did a JV with Tom Freston with Viacom and MTV to build an internet television network called VBS.TV, which launched in 2007. And it was originally going to be, short, medium form documentaries. And one of the first things that they went to do was to shoot what was going to be a 10-minute film about a rock band, a metal band in Iraq during the occupation in Iraq. That short ended up becoming a feature documentary called Heavy Metal in Baghdad, which went on to win awards at TIFF, at Berlin, etc. And to paraphrase our founder, CEO Shane, he would say a bit, that people always thought that everything on the internet was shit. I don't want. Can I say that?
Yes,
right?
You can, of course.
Okay, good.
No censoring.
TV was great, and that film was the hallowed ground. And the fact of the matter is that the first thing that we did went straight from the web, to the big screen, and that I think really was the beginning of the major change in the company, which was the fact that video delivered over IP did not necessarily have to equate with terrible, unwatchable, short, not because just of the economics, but short because that was all that you could bear, type content. And so, the company doubled down, went really into video. And in 2010, 11, we were finally able to buy the domain Vice.com back from the pornographer who lost all his money in the market crash. And we brought VBS and Vice Land, which was the online home of the mag, together. And, they've lived happily ever since.
You guys write in your core motto, you're the definitive guide to enlightening information. And clearly you're in this you're in the youth space. You're basically multi-platform with a major focus on video for sure. How could you how would you describe your editorial line with regard to this enlightening information?
I would just say that we cover the things that we're interested in, and we think that we tell those stories in a way that that the audience finds interesting as well. And it's just about I would just say reliability, and the reliability doesn't necessarily come in saying I want to know about music, so I'm going to go to Vice, or I want to know just about fashion, so I'm going to go to Vice. It's a view of the world through through a cultural lens, and I think that people come to Vice because they want to be enlightened, maybe not so much in the religious sense, but maybe more in the sense that there are a lot of things that just aren't spoken about honestly or transparently or candidly in other media outlets, because they define their content output maybe by some mission statement written by someone who's no longer at the company, that was approved by their venture capitalists, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas with Vice, it's just what feels right. It's just what feels honest to us, and that honesty, I think, resonates with our audience.
Mm-hmm. Some of the material you have is clearly more on the provocative side. You've got a strong tone to what you're doing. My question, that's my reflection. My question then would be: you are widespread. You're global in reach. Do you see any differences in the way different countries are absorbing and consuming the media that you're producing?
100%. 100% and 0%, to be totally honest about that. I would say that it changed. So the audience changes because some things stay the same and some things change, right? The way that the executives have structured the company internationally is they've allowed, each territory to, when they were building it out, they basically had to make sure that whoever was going to lead that territory understood the fundamentals about what the brand is. And then they have to, the founders have to sort of be a little bit hands off in the sense of allowing the person that they've entrusted to carry the brand in that territory to mold and shape it, to make it relevant for that audience. Because you as cultured and as sophisticated as the people who run Vice are, they can't be of every culture at every single moment of every single day. So there's that, and I think that it's just a fundamental trust in making the right hiring decisions on that side. And then on the other side, we do have content that is published in every local territory, but beyond that, what we'll do is we'll just track the sort of analytics, or we'll know a big release that's coming up that we want to make global. And then we'll take things that, that started or that were maybe done by the US, or that were maybe done by Germany or by Mexico or by Beijing. And then we'll take them and make them global releases. And the reason that we, have found so much success in that is the fact that a lot of what, Vice is predicated on is, I guess you could call it the flattening of the world, the networking of the world, the fact that there is a global youth culture that has existed, I'd say, in a lot of ways, but that is sort of formalized by the internet. And so the fact that kids in Stockholm and Shanghai and Sao Paulo can all be listening to the same thing, can all be wearing the same jeans, can all be, interested in the same, music and culture and art, I think is something that unifies the Vice audience globally. And it, honestly, for me, being of the target, the target,
Gen Y,
of that demo, I feel that way. I do feel that way because I have my friends around the world, and we are interested in a lot of the same things. And to make it feel like I am part of a culture that is beyond Williamsburg, Brooklyn is a really, really nice feeling.
Well, yeah, so you have this notion of something that cuts across all cultures and yet has local flavor, because each country has their own material, has their own bent, and so you have to sort of something like you have a cultural share, but then you have a local dive down. Do you know what I mean?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So, Sterling, you are responsible for partnerships and partners and distribution, correct?
Yeah, I mean, platform is such a nebulous word, but yeah, I mean, basically, there are any number of places. I mean, it depends how jargony I want to get in sort of like user experience stuff, but there are different places where a user can come across the Vice brand, or would expect to come across the Vice brand, or would hope to. And that is from a device perspective, that is from an app perspective, it's from a social platform perspective, from a publisher platform perspective, from an aggregator, et cetera, et cetera. So, just to put it in some real context, that means that I look after how we work strategically with Facebook, with Twitter, with Foursquare, with Tumblr, with YouTube, with Hulu, with Amazon, with Netflix, with the Huffington Post and CNN and the Daily Beast and the Atlantic, with Roku and Boxy and Apple TV and Xbox and the like. So that's kind of, it's hardware, it's software, it's social, it's everything basically. And it's how we look at that audience across those areas, realizing that they're often the same people across different devices or different touch points, and just making sure that we're there in the right way, and then that we create pathways back to to basically come into the Vice fold and to discover the brand, to find some content, and then to realize that, this is something that they want to stick around with. So then all of a sudden we can build that recurring audience.
It's fascinating. Just listening to you, because I'm just thinking about how more traditional media must view you as some strange beast, or at least what you're trying to do is completely foreign to what they've ever been brought up to do.
When I don't know, I think that the analogy that I have settled on that I like the most is I just see what any modern day media brand, and frankly any consumer, any CPG brand, anything, I see it as political campaigning. I honestly feel like it's the right analogy, because you have a central message, right? Some central value proposition, which in politics you call your platform, and then you realize that you have to contextualize that platform, that message, for the different constituencies that exist. You find ways to contextualize that message for different audiences based on, their own characteristics, based on their interests, based on where they live, who they are. And then you just try and create, ways for them to join, in the case of politics, your campaign, your movement, whatever you want to call it. And then the same for, media communications. It's just about contextualizing your message for an audience to make it relevant to them. And then, telling them to come hang out with you.
I so hear you. That's really interesting. And to think about somehow how politics will use all these devices, a lot of it can also be used from a research standpoint. So like sort of going upstream and saying, well, what are people interested in, and testing political slogans. So my question to you was, what level of research do you have, or do you find yourself more acting and finding out how that goes, as opposed to sort of upstream preparing and doing more of a study before you launch?
Well, it depends on what aspect of the business you're talking about, right? Because if you're running display media, obviously you can run that in such a way that, campaigns can optimize on the fly. You can run multiple pieces of creative and see what sticks. That on that side. We're not doing that on the content side, where we're not running multiple stories or necessarily versions of the story. I think that there are some publishers who have in the past done things like that, and maybe who can continue to do so. I believe that Huffington Post would, basically be A/B testing titles and thumbnails on the fly, and then just sort of doubling down on what works there. But we have a bunch of, we have a lot of detail on our audience, and while we hadn't had as much in years past, we know more and more and more today. And really what it's done is it's kind of reinforced a lot of the things that we sort of inherently knew. But obviously now having the rigor behind that is really, it gives us clarity of vision, both in terms of knowing exactly what we're doing, but then also obviously in speaking to brands and to advertisers and making sure that we can clearly demonstrate to them the value of the audience that we have.
Do you, in Vice terminology, do you use the word CRM, or how do you view customer relationship management in the Vice world?
I guess you could argue that that CRM could apply to two worlds, right? The world of the clients, the advertisers, and the world of the users. In a sense, because we are giving our content away for free, that means that, the advertisers end up being incredibly important clients, because they help enable, and this is, I think, the way that we position it, because it's true, is the advertisers and brands who work with Vice are basically enabling, these audiences to connect with and to find the stories they're not really going to get anywhere else. And so that sort of, modern day Medici type role is something that I think is really important to us. And the good news with the audience is the fact that, we get it. Like, we get when an advertiser is bringing a message to us, enabling this piece of, content, video, editorial, whatever it may be that I'm about to consume. And, we get that, and we attribute that value to the brand, which is a very good thing. So to answer your question about CRM, in CRM on the brand and advertiser side, we look after that as well as anyone can, and we're only getting better at that. It's really interesting because we have so many media brands under the Vice Media portfolio, and that's growing. And then you multiply that out by territories, and then you think about the way that brands are structured. Some are incredibly, hierarchical and centralized. Some are incredibly decentralized. And, anytime you want to do a global campaign, because, Vice offers, one of the key benefits that Vice offers is a global solution for brands. Sure. But oftentimes, someone senior at a brand may love it, but then it's like, okay, great, let's all get buy-in from all the geos, because, they all have their own budgets that they have complete autonomy over. So then you end up going on the road show. So to that end, CRM is incredibly important for us on the brand side. On the user side, we had a user registration system in the early days of VBS. And then we got rid of it when we moved to Vice.com. We this year will relaunch a user registration system, and the key to that, which would give you a lot more data on your users, of course, and a lot more of an ability to communicate on a sort of like census basis with your audience. You just have to communicate the value of what it means to register. And so you have to obviously have something that that you can offer that's meaningful. In exchange. So so we know a bit. We know a decent amount when it comes to census based detail.
Right. It's more like you have anonymous data on people's traffic, but you don't know them nominatively because they haven't registered.
Right. I mean, we do have nominal data in some places, but being able to look at that, in the aggregate, can almost by definition only come from having a user registration system. And we will have one shortly.
So you guys have signed partnerships with some of the biggest names that I've seen between Intel, Dell, GE. How do those get signed? I mean, who's going after those? You go to your headquarters, and how do you discriminate between these partners, or what are the defining characteristics, I should say, if put it on a positive spin, on how brands associate with you?
I think that brands come to Vice when they want to have an honest and open dialogue with youth, right? Mm-hmm. Depending on the territory, it could be global, it could be territory by territory. And what we do is we explain the fact that the best way to communicate and to cut through the clutter with youth is to add value to their lives, right? Stop interrupting them, stop getting in the way of what they're intending to do, and actually be the thing that they're intending to do.
Yeah, participate,
be a part
with
of that.
Mm-hmm.
Participate in that. And, the thing that we said now that our Chief Strategy Officer, Spencer, had said for years is, brands need to think and act like media companies. Mm-hmm. He was saying that in 2006, cut to 2009, 2010. A lot of people are saying that, and every brand is automatically a publisher, by the fact that they have Facebook and Twitter accounts. So, the next sort of turn of the screw for that is to say, how are you not only going to publish, but how are you going to make what you're publishing meaningful?
Valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how are you going to add value to people's lives?
So that was my feeling, is that you're going to be dealing with some large corporates, and I know many, and they come to you with this message like, "Oh, I've got the greatest product, I want to sell it." Well, okay. So then the conversation gets a little bit more textual. All right. Well, listen, I know you want to sell, and maybe we can find some better content. And how does that conversation go along? Because if they're the ones paying, they're the clients. You have this sort of tricky situation where you're trying to vet and help them become more powerful, more meaningful, more relevant, and yet they kind of have the me approach. How does that conversation go?
Carefully. No, it all depends on, I don't want to say maybe the sophistication of the brand, but also the sort of freedom that the, brand managers, the brand stewards may have in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. And I think that what we do is we start by saying, what are you looking to accomplish? And, what are the key things that you think will get you there? What are the key things that you think may be standing in your way? And then we just have a very honest conversation about it. And we firmly believe that the creation of high quality, high value content is the key to cutting through the clutter and to developing a meaningful relationship with the audience. Obviously, the brand has to follow that up kind of with everything else that they're doing. So we like to spend some time thinking about all the other things that the brands are doing to make sure that if, this content is going to be some sort of, tip of the spear, top of the funnel, whatever you want to call it, sort of strategy. Again, in the same way that I'm going to different places and looking to recruit audiences to join, what it is that we're doing with Vice, I would argue the brand might use Vice to help, do the same thing. So it's just a matter of listening and of having a dialogue back and forth. And then what we'll do is we'll listen, we'll understand, and then we'll come back with a recommendation. We'll come back with a beautifully designed, beautifully thought out proposal, and we'll talk through it. And, if it works, fantastic. If it's going to end up being, something that, where the brand's needs are seemingly irreconcilable with ours, then in that incredibly rare circumstance, we have things that
agree to disagree. Done, Well, yeah, I like the listening to you. Yeah, I like to think of this notion between coaching and coaxing people along, and so I think us who may be closer to you in particular, closer to the audience and this notion of a tangible, valuable content, we end up having to sort of adjust people's attitudes and mindsets to allow them to see the light, the enlightening part, if you will. So, Sterling, wanted to ask you, you guys entered into an agreement with WPP a couple of years ago, right?
Yes.
And how has that changed? Because I know a lot of the folks at WPP, and I was just wondering, what did that change anything demonstrably, or has it just been of a silent relationship?
No, it's been very, very helpful. I don't know. I don't know what level of detail I can get into, but the fact of the matter is that WPP and Sir Martin,
SMS, as we like to call them,
very presciently saw that that the advertising landscape was changing in fundamental ways, and that WPP needed to find strategic ways to evolve its thinking and its capabilities. Right? I think that that's a fairly safe and broad thing to say about the changing advertising landscape. And the question is, for companies as big as WPP, who would have the foresight and the tenacity and the capability to be able to act on that insight? And Sir Martin did, along with the folks at Group M, and others in the WPP family.
My friend Mark Reed amongst them.
And they pulled the trigger, and as a result, Vice and WPP have been able to sort of explore this path together and to try and come up with really smart, innovative solutions for its clients. That said, Vice is not a WPP exclusive partner, so much as we have the benefit of being very, very good friends.
Interesting. So when you talk about all these different channels that you're dealing with, the devices, the apps, the platforms, how would you describe the biggest challenge that you face, Sterling, within the Vice Group and managing all these apps, and what kind of advice might you have someone else trying to grapple with them all?
Oh man. I have these conversations with friends and peers in this world. It's really tough. I mean, there are a lot of different things to think about. One is there's the pressure to check every box just to sort of be able to say, look, we're here, we're there. I don't think that you should be everywhere for its own sake. You have to be everywhere in the best way possible, because what do they call them? Moments of
truth. Moments of truth.
Right. There you go.
Right. Well,
if it's a shit moment of truth, then it's not going to be a good thing. So make sure that if you're going to play in these environments that are difficult to develop for, look at how fragmented Android is. Developing Android apps is tough. It is. Developing for the Xbox platform as it is now is tough. So only go to those places if you are willing to fully commit to those platforms, to those interaction points, to those whatever it may be. Just make sure that you are where you are in the best way possible.
As opposed to sort of a spray and pray.
Yeah, right. As opposed to that. I would also say, data on the user base is tough. You want to be able to see that, the Harvard Business Review wrote a piece on advertising analytics 2.0 a few months back, and they talk about this thing that obviously was probably stated somewhere else, but I found it up there, is this idea of swim lane measurement, which is, when you're looking at the ROI of one communications channel over the other. Whereas if you can take an integrated view and then see the impact that maybe social has in the context of, direct marketing and out of home and television, et cetera, that seeing that and being able to look at an ROI, that from a brand perspective, eventually they want to quantify down to, an increase in sales, or if it's a film release, to butts and seats on opening weekend. That's a difficult thing. And then, I would say that the sort of analysis and analytics is one thing. The sort of standardization of development and of upkeep of those different sort of custom built applications that you may have is another part. And then also just like making sense of it. I used to think that I could, put neat little categories: social platforms, publishers, aggregators, curators, this and that. I realized that they're really like, what happens when YouTube starts commissioning original content?
Right.
What happens when
selling their
BuzzFeed starts writing things, for on behalf of brands? What happens when, all of these different things happen? They end up conflating so much that I think you just have to kind of accept the complexity and not try and define it. And it's a very sort of like Buddhist view to take, on the advertising and media landscape. But, you kind of just have to accept it all as one thing.
I had my friend of mine in a UK television company. He said exactly the same thing. And it's just not easy for traditional minds to compute. People who have been to business school and have had 30 years of success, you're telling them to sort of accept chaos in a certain way, and that's hard for them to manage in their heads. But it is the way. Well, Sterling, I don't want to take up any more of your time. It's been great to share with you. I've had a scintillating time listening to you. Sterling, can you tell us how anyone could track you down or follow you or connect with you, or anything else you'd like to tell for people to track down?
Sure. Well, the Vice websites, our main site is at vice.com. Noisy is our music brand. That's noisy, noisey.com. Motherboard is our tech site, which is at motherboard.vice.com. We have a number of other properties which you'll be able to find from there. Me personally, I tweet incredibly infrequently, and may just be broadcasts of Foursquare check-ins at Sterl the Whirl. My high school AIM username, STERLTHEWHIRL. And otherwise, I don't know. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. And my last name is Proffer, Proffer.
Well, I'll put all of that into the show notes. Sterling, thanks again for spending this time with me. I appreciate it, and look forward to staying in touch and tracking down some more Vice content wherever they may be.
We'll watch the show on HBO.
All right, we'll do. Thanks a lot, Sterling.
Take care.
Thanks for having listened to this recording of the Minter Dialogue Internet Show. You'll find the show notes on themindset.com, where you can also sign up for my weekly newsletter at /subscribe. If you like the show, please rate it in iTunes, and don't forget to click the handy Facebook like button or to tweet it out. In the meantime, please come join the conversation at The Mindset, or catch me on Twitter at MDIAL. Happy trails.